feeling when you realize that 500,000 people died of fentanyl poisoning, and we were told to fall in line and accept it.
In the night, the stormy night, away she flies.
Hey, good evening, everybody. This is Mark with Beyond the Struggle podcast. This evening, I am here with Benjamin. Benjamin, how are you doing this evening?
Doing good, man. Blessed to be here.
Thank you. So tonight, we're going to get Benjamin's testimony.
So I want you to picture a kid in a Toys R Us in 1995. He's like 3.5, 4 years old. And he's got his hands over his ears underneath the table. And he's screaming. And he's making a scene. And other parents are looking at his parents like they don't know what they're doing. The parents don't know what to do. And the kid doesn't know what's happening to him because his consciousness is barely formed. But what he's doing is the world is screaming at him, even though nobody's saying a word. The visual, sonic, tactile, like touch and feel, every single sense, the energy he gets from looking people in the eye is screaming at him like little ghosts in the shell, nails on chalkboard. And he's screaming right back, try to drown it out. And that kid was me. And I always like to say that everybody's got a different understanding of what addiction, substance use disorder, alcoholism. To me, all those terms are interchangeable, whatever mental health qualifiers you want to do. Because for me, there's some of those too. To me, the reason I'm an alcoholic and an addict long before I took my first drink or drug is because I always felt uncomfortable within my body and my spirit. And I was always looking for an external solution to heal or mask that internal problem. I was born and raised in Washington, D.C. Yes, there are people who actually live in Washington, D.C. They do exist, and I'm one of them. My parents were both Ivy League educated journalists. My great-grandfather was the composer of songs like God Bless America and White Christmas. I'm not saying this to do a little flexy family genealogy. I'm saying it because addiction does not discriminate.
Amen.
And growing up from all outward appearances, I had a life that many envied, and there's a good reason for that. There was a lot of stability growing up. There was a nice little house in a neighborhood called Cleveland Park in D.C. with my parents. The walls were lined with books. We weren't billionaires, but I ain't never go hungry. And I had a beautiful childhood in a lot of ways. But that moment at the Toys R Us was paired with a therapist when I was 3 years old, and my parents realized there was something a little off about me. And he said, your son has Asperger's syndrome. And today, the politically correct term for this is autism spectrum disorder. And what it means is that I am hypersensitive to sensory overload. I am hyper obsessed about certain behavioral patterns that give me comfort. And it's a big spectrum. But I didn't know how to connect with people. I didn't ever feel like I was human. I didn't ever feel, regardless of all the love and attention my mom gave me and all the great lessons my dad gave me, he was a little more stoic and firm, but he was a good man. You know, there's a lot of that in this world. But I had a beautiful childhood, but I ain't never know how to connect with people, and I thought I was different. But the one thing that made me feel good was my first addiction, which was the dopamine I got from external validation from other people. Every single time someone said something good to me, which was usually never about me as a person, it was like, you're really good at video games. When I got a tiny bit older, started playing piano, writing poetry, which were my natural predilections, my family they didn't push me in that way, but my parents are both writers. My mom's a singer. There's that stuff. Like I said before the jump when we got on, like, it's like being in a family of auto mechanics or doctors or lawyers or football players. Like, it's no pressure, but it's part of you and it's part of your family. And when the opportunity arises, they nurture that. And so when I wrote my first poems and when I made my first strides playing the piano at the same time that I was having a hard time connecting with other kids just on like an interpersonal basis because it was so uncomfortable looking other people in the eye. It was so uncomfortable learning to read the facial signals, the micro expressions on people's faces and connect with them as a kid. When people would say, whether it was my parents who had no intention of living vicariously through me, but just trying to encourage positivity positivity, which is a good thing a parent can do. Like, wow, that's such an incredible poem. Like, you're rhyming iambic pentameter, Shakespearean stuff at 8 years old. You're playing a Handel, a Bach invention, like a Mozart sonata when you're 11 years old, winning these judgings. And, I wasn't good at playing football. I wasn't good at playing baseball. I tried all that. I was terrible at it because team sports were never my thing. I'm a solo. I wasn't physically coordinated in a large motor, but more than that, I didn't know how to connect with people in any sense. But I would light up like a Christmas tree internally, this like burning sensation of physical, spiritual, and emotional equilibrium when I would get an attaboy from my friends or my family. And the sad thing is that at this very same time this was happening and I was discovering this feedback reward loop, my parents got divorced. They weren't the right match for each other. I'm a person whose family trauma pales in comparison to other people's. I don't even really like to use that word because there's people who are abandoned, go through group homes in the foster care system. There's SA, DV. My stuff doesn't touch that. But the stability in my home eroded with my parents split. And they were very different people, and those ideological differences were the crux for why they split. My mom was very sensitive, creative, open. My dad was very stoic, ideologically rigid and closed, and very masculine. And so even though they only lived 5 blocks apart and they made every effort to create this environment where I could thrive, and my dad didn't move away, he stayed here even though he got the offer to move, the distance was that I had to create 2 completely separate versions of myself to chameleon myself to their ideologies and the ideologies of the people that they brought into their lives. And my mom took up with this very charismatic and charming and kind man who was an alcoholic. He was a house painter and a musician, and there were a lot of good things about him, but when she met him, he was sober. And about a year in, because my parents got divorced when I was 6, he fell off the wagon. He was in the rooms, and he got a little too comfortable in the relationship. His life got a little bit too good. I ain't know none of this. But I do remember the first time I saw them having a real fight. There was a bottle of Tanqueray gin, and there were a couple beers on the counter. And it went from them just bickering, which I had seen before, same way I saw with my parents before they got divorced, to him yelling at the top of his lungs, holding onto a knife in the kitchen, pushing her onto the counter, and like throttling her a little bit, and me running out to that little suburban back porch in DC and hiding underneath the stairs, and then coming back in to see my mom crying. And this person is the crux of my identity. My dad's a good man, but he's distant. He's got his own emotional work that later on I would hear. He openly will say he has boundaries rigidly within himself of discipline that he will never get to that space within himself. It's not his priority in life. But my mom was open. She was kind. She was nurturing, but she was broken. Tears falling on the ground. And while that water fell on the ground, a different type liquid went in a little glass of hers on the table. And she started drinking more than she had been before she was with him. And so what ended up happening is you have this situation in which I'm experiencing a certain thing with my mom beginning the starting stages of her alcoholism. You have my dad who is going across the country, at first driving up to Kingston, New York to reunite with his old high school sweetheart who was super cool and artsy, and we would go to Vermont, where I live now, coincidentally, and we would get some time out in nature, little skinny, half-Jewish city boy, haul sleds and like chopping wood. It was real picturesque. It was real cool. But then he started flying out to California and getting some real distance away from me. And at the time when I needed most, when I was developing, kids making fun of me at school because I was different, I was dealing with my mom being abused. And this ain't a sob story. This ain't a pour me a drink, like whatever. I'm just keeping it real about the rationalizations that I used when it went from seeking escapism through approval to a substance. Because the same way I learned to chameleon myself to get the approval of my parents, that chameleoning approach to meet their ideologies became survival. Because when I would go out with my dad to California trying to be part of his world, the only time his eyes would ever light up and he would look away from his girlfriend or his colleagues is when I would listen to the things that they were saying at the table, and I would parrot them and mimic them. These are guys with Harvard degrees, published books, all kinds of crazy stuff. And I was a little 10, 11-year-old kid just trying to get my dad's approval. So I would hear him talking about geopolitics and all these crazy things. And I would listen, I would pipe up, and I would improvise my own little thing because one of my Asperger's autism obsessions was words. And I wouldn't feel comfortable there, but when they said, wow, I can't believe you understand it. And the crazy thing is, I didn't even really understand they were saying. I just parroted a variation because I'm a people pleaser of what they wanted. But that was like a shot of dope in my arm in my spirit feeling I belong. And when I was with my mom and I would play piano and her eyes would light up after her boyfriend would hurt her, and I would be able to like be there, watch the shows with her, and then like have that one little piece of discipline carrying on the songs in my family. And it continued like that until I started going to therapy. I started going to therapy when I was 9, because when I was 9 years old, I told my mom I wanted to kill myself. And I would look at that same type of knife that her boyfriend would hold in the kitchen, and I would start thinking about what it would feel like if I started like playing around with it on my hands, like not cutting myself, but like, you know, drawing, just seeing.
Yeah.
And I thought, what would happen if I put that through my chest? Like, would anybody miss me? Just crazy, like, you know, mentally neurotypical kid stuff, but I was open about it. But when I went to therapy, I did the same thing I did with my dad. The therapist reminded me of my dad. And so I just tried to impress him. I used big words. I didn't talk about what I was actually going through. I told him enough about the abuse my mom was going through, mostly emotional and like verbal, but tiny bit of physical too, and the alcohol and all that stuff. But I kept it on the surface because I didn't want him to get in there and actually get to it, because I was too afraid of doing that. 4 years into that therapy journey, my mom had basically cut ties with this guy, but she started drinking more than 2 bottles of wine a day. And she was a full-blown alcoholic. She was taking benzos. I didn't know about any of that. My dad was more and more distant out in California because he was building a new relationship and really a new life. And I wasn't as much of a part of that, save for the weekends that he was back in DC, which were less and less, like once a month or twice a month on average. And so my mom, at the height of her alcoholism, became my caregiver. And what ended up happening is long before I started drinking, well, not that long, about a year before, the first time I ever stole anything from anyone was when my mom was completely drunk at this shopping mall down in Florida on a spring break, and I wanted a shirt. Because at this point, my obsessions had gone from video games and Pokemon cards to I noticed that the kids in my school who would wear certain shirts would get more girls talking to them, and more than that would just like be like a thing. I noticed all the preppy kids who were like cool wore the same Abercrombie and Lacoste shirts, and so it used to be like the GameCube and the Xbox, but then it was the uniform, and I just wanted to belong, but I didn't think I was good enough without that. So my mom was drunk, she wasn't willing to get it for me, so I used my Asperger's pattern recognition to stand over her shoulder deceitfully, and I watched the ATM card, and I said, "Mom, I'm going to the bathroom." I tied my shoe under the table, I got the ATM card, and this is what's crazy. I said, "Why don't you get another glass of wine?" The dinner was done, but I wanted her drunk. So at 13 years old, I got my mom drunk so I could steal her money before I started drinking. I understood that, and I walked out of that mall not just with one shirt, I didn't even need to steal the money, because she ended up drinking and buying me everything that I wanted. Buying me a new skateboard to take to the skate park, the Van Skate Park in Orlando, after we went to Universal. And then 6 months later, after, you know, having a couple little sips of alcohol here and there, just curiously, not because I knew that changing consciousness chemically was even a thing, but like I would be curious, and I'd cumulatively begin to understand that when I drank this, that I would become a little less burdened by my oversensitive mind and like crazy brain. And what ended up happening is I went over to my friend's house in like 7th or 8th grade. I forget the grade, but I'll never forget the day, because the liquor bottles in his parents' cabinet were too short. There was this 6-pack of Sam Adams Oktoberfest in the basement. It had mold on the cap. It was long forgotten. It was the one thing we could find. We popped it open like on the side of the table, leaving little chips in the wood. And it's disgusting. It had been there for years in this lukewarm basement. But he took a sip, and it was gross. It was like rotten, mildewy beer, and he spat it out. He's like, "Man, I can't do this." I drank every single piece of it, and about halfway into the second beer, it was like when you go on a plane and you come down and readjust to the original like pressure and your ears pop. Every single aspect of my spiritual burden that same young kid had underneath the table was just gone. I didn't feel awkward. I didn't feel less than. I didn't feel different. I felt connected to something greater than myself that came in a bottle. And a lot of people say, after using for years, I finally knew I was an addict alcoholic. I knew then and there that was the solution that I was going to chase. I was like, it's this easy. I don't need approval. I don't need to hype myself up or like pursue any talents. I can just get a crappy little 6-pack of beer. Same thing my mom's abusive boyfriend drank. Same thing my mom drank. Same thing my dad's pretentious friends drink when they're feeling each other and like getting in their little ego battles. It's up. Like, let's go. So I started drinking whenever I could. And, you know, I get into high school and I start realizing, back to the whole logo on the shirt, that not only is alcohol a way that I can soothe my frazzled nerves and reconcile the divide, emotional, spiritual, and otherwise, between me, my family, my friends, and everybody else. But it's also a status symbol. I would study the kids who were far wealthier than me. I was an upper middle class, lower upper class kid, but I went to a school in D.C. with the sons and daughters of senators, congressmen, presidential aides, billion-dollar hedge fund owners, baseball team, and shopping mall owners that made me look like nothing. And I would see these guys who would have like thinning hair, no offense to anybody who's balding, but they would be insecurely touching at their hair while at the same time fondling their Bentley keys. And that always stuck with me because I could tell they were insecure about aging, but the country club membership, the Bentley, the Amex Black Card, whatever it was a material extension of their worth and their identity. And so I didn't think I was worthy of going into a party, but I realized when I stole my mom's debit card, same way I did in that place, and I went and paid an older kid to get me a bottle of Hennessy Black, and I got a half ounce of Kush, and I got a little powder in high school when I started messing around that too. That was my ticket, because it was no longer Benjamin, the awkward, lanky, autistic piano kid. It was like, oh, this man's coming through with something that is of value to me. So it was more that it was more than that the substances were calming my nerves and taking me out of myself. It was that they became my passport to acceptance and approval. So it was that coalescence of the original addiction to approval and the substances that formed my identity. And there was one saving grace at this point, which is that my academics were going out the window. I used to like place second or third in like math contests for standardized tests because of my acuity for mathematics and also language. They would hang it on the refrigerator. I was starting to place in these like regional piano judgings, first place, like even beyond that, the level past that at 13, 14, because that's the one discipline I had. And I love playing piano. But when I first learned how to freestyle rap, I had been writing poetry for years, and I'll never forget it. I was in the cold at that stage of drunk when I was 16 years old, 2 years into my partying career in high school with these kids from Southeast DC, completely different world than me. And they would always be like, who's this funny, like, half Jewish suburban skinny jeans wearing? My nickname was Skinny Jeans because I was in the emo joints, man. I was in the, like, in the joints that looked like a skinny Christmas tree. But, like, I started freestyling, and they looked at me with respect. And more than that, it was something that beyond the approval, I actually just loved doing. It was a combination of music and poetry, everything that I was passionate about. And so the one thing, people say hip hop is glorifying of drugs. Hip hop gets, and there are some things in any musical culture, from metal to hip hop to jazz to whatever, there can be like negative and dark elements. But for me, hip hop and generative expressive poetry, more than the rigid classical music or the Shakespeare poetry that I wrote to impress my parents or played, it was my freedom. It was the one buzz that was stronger. But the more that I drank and the more that I used, the sad thing is that identity, the same thing I said, like with the businessman with the Bentley keys in the school parking lot, I stopped rapping about the stuff that I actually cared about, and I lost that heart, mind, mouth connection when I was freestyling, and I started cooking up this suburban Scarface false fantasy, and I'm a firm believer in that what you speak, you manifest, right? So at first it was just me BSing, but then within a couple years, like, I'm getting threatened with being expelled from this cushy private school. I'm leaving school every day to sell half pounds of weed that I'm half stealing my mom's card for to buy. But at the same time, I got college kids from Georgetown, GW, copping Molly and Kush from me, and I'm thinking I'm the cat's pajamas, and I'm paying for features from Project Pat and Mac Miller, and it's all money. It's not because they want to work with me, but like, I'm thinking I'm, Big Meech, like the Jewish prep school DC power circle version. And so it's all a delusion, right? But I remember I crashed my car, and this is because I want to take it back to the desperation and how pathetic it is. Because I had several car crashes before I got into my actual drug of choice. The first was when I was 18 years old, and me and my friend had just copped a half pound of Loud Pack, and we had the Henny and the Hypno, and we were going to this like private school party out in the burbs, and the blunt was just lit. And I go into the intersection, and I don't see this car, and it smashes into my car. Her car gets totaled, mine doesn't. And my friend looks at me, he's like, bro, we got Bud in the car, peel off. And so I skirt off, I'm like in this crazy trance. I end up smashing my car into a light pole at 60 miles an hour and totally totaling it. It's not my car, it's my mom's. And my friend skitters away, roaches out like a cockroach. He doesn't even take the Bud in the car. So it's me there with like the loud ass weed, we smoking in the car. It's obvious what's going on. People in the community are coming out, But when the cop comes, keep in mind, I think I'm thugged out. I'm thinking because like I'm hanging out with like DC Bloods and like going to Southeast to cop like quarter pounds or whatever. But when that cop came, I started crying and I started putting on this whole act. I wasn't scared because of like anything that was happening. I wasn't scared the person I hit was hurt. I just didn't want to not use that day. And so what ended up happening is I cried and I did this emotional manipulative thing with my mom. The person I hit pulls up. And when I get away, sacrificing all of my dignity, all of my humanity, lying about everything, I grab the little Gucci satchel full of weed and liquor and coke out of the back. And the second I get back into that cab, man, I'm thinking I'm Scarface again. I'm like, I outwitted the system, but I didn't outsmart myself because I had every single opportunity granted to me. I got into University of Miami Frost School of Music. It's not the best music school, but it's a decent one. And for my grades, it was a blessing I got in. Second I got down to that college, I didn't go to a single class. My parents put K up on that first year for me. My grandmother pitched in for the books and the boarding and all that stuff. I didn't go to more than 5 classes because all I wanted to do was get drunk, get high, and spit freestyle raps. And then I get arrested, and again, I cry, I roach out, I find some half measure where I don't have to directly snitch on any of my friends, but like I get out of that room, and then the second I get out, I'm Scarface again. I drop out of school, go back home, get a dead-end job. But to my friends who like in high school, I'm still the dude who's selling drugs. I got all this stuff, and it's all cool, right? Until I steal $100,000 from the college fund my family set up for me. And I'm driving around the country, visiting all my friends who haven't dropped out of school. And they got real girlfriends, not just one-night stands with girls who are drunk and desperate enough to hang out with me. It's like a real actualization of their life because they party. The difference between them is they party, but their life is figuring out what they're going to do. And more than any job, figuring out who they are. They're taking psychedelics to have spiritual experiences, but their life ain't the party. They're not sober, but they have what I've been seeking out that regardless of them being chemically sober or not, is not happening for me. They're moving towards adulthood. They're confronting their fears. They're putting themselves out there. But see, my life was the party. And I would selectively go around and like steal money from my fam, cash out all this stuff. At this point, I'm not even selling drugs anymore. I'm just stealing from my family, but I'm telling everybody I'm trapping. I'm rapping about this trap life I'm not living. And then the second I get down to the last $500, I'm driving back from visiting my friends at Villanova and St. Joe's University in Philly, driving back Route 95, 490 in DC. I get to this exit. It's a January afternoon. And I've been staying up all night off Xans, Coke, and a fifth of Bacardi Limon. And I hydroplane it smashed into 3 cars. And this time, the cops don't let me off. But when they're cuffing me and they're putting me in the back, and my family bailed me out, I lawyered up, I ended up just getting probation. But I didn't know that then. There were 3 total cars smoking around me. Thank God nobody was hurt but me, and I only got a bruised rib. But, because if that had happened, I would deservedly have gone to jail, and I probably deserved, like, several manslaughter charges that day. I was selfish as hell. But the one thought I had when I slapped the cuffs was not, I ran through $100K for my family, not, I did all this. It was, I'm not going to be able to drink or use today. And my mom bailed me out, and I was still so resentful, and here's the messed up thing. This was January 2012. My mom got sober and started going to the rooms in June of 2011. So when this happened, my mom was 6 months sober. And what I did is she bailed me out. I was like, I don't want you driving me home. I walked from Bethesda, Maryland to like DC, which is like 5 miles away, in like a t-shirt in like 20-degree weather, just angry. I get home, I grab my mom's Xanax because she's still taking it at this point. I crush it and I rail it in front of her and I say, look what you did. Look what you did being selfish with your boyfriend. Look what you did cheating on my dad and divorcing him. I was blaming everybody but myself. And my comeuppance did not come in the form of my mom kicking me out. She probably should have. My comeuppance came in the form is that, like any good addict, I mitigated consequences. The fund for college was completely exhausted, but my family still wanted me to go to school, and I wanted to reconnect with my disappointed dad, who now had moved with his new wife in San Francisco. So like any good addict, I said, listen, there's this college out there. It's $10K a semester. The room and board's included. I'm going to stop drinking. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to get good grades. Like, can I please have this chance? And I go to San Francisco, and I go out there, and I stop drinking. But about 4 weeks in, I like to think everything happens for a reason, even though I wouldn't wish this part on my worst enemy. 4 wisdom teeth come in severely impacted, to the point that they're not just going to take him out. They need to do jaw realignment surgery. They need to put me out for 5-6 hours with propofol and fetty, like to knock me out. And I go in there for the surgical consultation, and then they do the appointment. And I go into the surgery wearing a Raw Rolling Papers t-shirt, right? And the anesthesiologist peeps game because it's out in San Francisco where, like, weed is a big part of the culture. And the last thing I hear before I go under is, you know, you're not going to be able to smoke weed when you're recovering from this. And then I wake up and, of course, don't really want to know about anything to do with the, like, care of my swollen chipmunk jaw or whatever. The first thing I say is, what are you saying that I can't smoke weed? And he's like, no, it's not. It's not just that you can't smoke weed. You can't smoke cigarettes. You can't even drink a milkshake or a soda out of a straw, because if you do, the clots will come out of your mouth and you'll get dry socket, which is nerve damage that we can't even cure with this. And he gave me a script for 100 perk 5s. And it wasn't their fault. It was a serious surgery. If anything, they underprescribed me. This isn't a mean doctor. They even said, they're like, it's clear you use substances. You need to be careful with this. You'll need this to not go insane and be able to go to sleep and, like, rest up. But, like, please be careful with this. We could tell you use substances. Like, don't play around with this. They gave me fair warning. But when I took a couple of them perk 5s, it was like the moment in the basement with the Sam Adams times 1,000. Instead of depressurizing, it felt like I had broken through on a DMT trip, but like a dopamine version of it where I was still completely lucid. And I don't mean to glorify it, man, but at this point, it was not, I've found the solution. It's like, I don't care about anything anymore. And it wasn't suburban after that. It was going days without eating because 4 blocks away from my college rate apartment on, like, Post Street in San Francisco was O'Farrell, and then, you know, Ellis and Eddie and Turk Street in the Tenderloin, which is the worst open air drug market in Northern California. And honestly, like, Skid Row's bad, Portland's bad, Seattle's bad, but bro, the Tenderloin is something else. And every single thing that I used to say that I did in the glorifying raps, like, you know, like pulling up on the block with, like, you know, a knife and fighting with corner boys and, like, but it wasn't Scarface and glamorous. It was getting sliced up over $20. It was like, you know, snorting so much Dilaudid and so many 30s that my nose would bleed and I would fall out mixing it with liquor, waking up in my own vomit. It was pawning my computer just to not have restless legs and throw up. And then 6 months after I came back from that first semester, I found myself riding up with this 5-year Jessup prison in Maryland ex-convict dude in a tinted Acura, listening to, like, Scarface, the rapper from Texas, die, die. And it was, I was like, I'm actually living, buying heroin, like at a trap house, snorting it off of the side of a coin, lit with the dude with, like, a pistol in the center console. And I'm like, okay, this is real now. And at that point, my mom was 1.5 years sober, and she sent me to treatment at Father Martin's Ashley. But the only thing, it was a Catholic treatment center, and I still got off on the fact that they put me in the Chris Farley suite. Because Chris Farley, may he rest in peace, tried to get sober there. And there's a famous story about how a helicopter flew down, and he mooned all the Catholic priests, like Father Carey and Father Martin, who were running it, as he flew away. And then 6 weeks later, he was dead. And I got off on that. I was like, yeah, well, I'm in rehab for blues and dope, but, like, I'm in the Chris Farley suite, bro. And the only thing I was thinking in there was, I'm an addict. I'm not going to be able to control this, but there is no way I'm getting sober. So I agreed to the minimum thing that the treatment techs and the counselor said. I said I would go to a sober house. I let them put the down payment on it. Said I would go to an IOP out in Cali, but I secretly arranged my classes so that they didn't work with the sober houses curfew and with the IOP, because I was so determined to keep using. And I sent my mom photos of, like, the rooms and, like, meetings that I would go to, not because I wanted to go, just to get her off my back and because she was in the program. And I would stockpile several photos of each one, so I would only have to go to one a week. Like, one would be the books, one would be the promises, one would be the chairs, and I would text one to her every day at a different time. And every single thing that I thought would not happen happened in between that point of I went to treatment inpatient the first time, New Year's Eve 2012. And in between that and June 13th, 2016, which is my sobriety date, if you can think of any Kurt Cobain cliche, you know, picking cigarettes about the gutter, lancing black tar and fentanyl abscesses, you know, having dystonic seizures from methadone and Klonopin withdrawal, army crawling at 4 a.m., not just in my mom's house, but my friend's house, nodding out in my friend's house, puking on myself for mixing liquor and black tar and crack, smoking drywall, thinking it's crack, all of those things. But I still thought that when my dad was at the foot of my bed in San Francisco for that dystonic seizure where they had to slam me with Ativan to keep me from frothing and biting my own tongue off, and he's crying at the foot of the bed just saying, please, can you get sober after this? I thought if they only understood that I'm doing this because I'm in so much pain, they wouldn't just stop criticizing me. They would give me the money that I was trying to get from them, because the sad thing was, the only time they thought that I was sober is when I had enough dope that I wasn't sick. And the only time that they thought that I was high was when I was tweaking, going through withdrawal. So that then cemented in me, not their fault, but they didn't get it. My mom was an alcoholic, my dad wasn't, but they weren't dope fiends. They weren't crackheads like me. And I know those terms are stigmatizing or whatever, but I got to speak my piece because that's the way I saw myself at. I'm hitting my vein in between going to these outpatient treatment centers just to make my mom happy, stealing her car, 3 a.m. across the Chesapeake Bay Bridge, bundles of dope from New York City, all of this places I'm going, trying to get outside of myself, seedy motel rooms in New Jersey juxtaposed with Oscar statues from Irving Berlin, my great-grandfather on the medal, shooting dope with my 85-year-old grandma telling me, look at me, Ben, are you doing all right? Lying to their friggin' face, leaving on Christmas to meet up with my Ukrainian plug in Brooklyn and shoot dope in a Dunkin' Donuts bathroom. That's the real present for me. We're recording this at the holiday season, so I gotta keep it a break. None of that did anything to make me want to quit. It was not until I shot half a bundle of Fetty dope at once and I didn't get high. I got physically high, but I did not get spiritually or emotionally high. I had been to treatment, inpatient and outpatient. I had been in the rooms. I had been to therapy. I had been to counseling. I'd seen my mom and some of my friends get sober. I'd seen my friends die. I had been sliced in my side. I've been punched in my face. I've been dragged out of convenience stores. And all of this is the exact same little scared kid with the hands over his ears, just like these damn headphones on my head right now. It's not big thugging. It's not Kodak Black suburban Jewish version. It's that same friggin' kid using all these substances, trying to blank out the same sensory overload and internal spiritual pain. But when that half ball of crack and those couple bundles of dope didn't take me, I had three options. Number one, I could try to check out, but I had tried that. I shot whole half grams of Fetty Lace dope at once and I didn't even pass out. So that was off the table. And I tried. I gave it the old college try, even though I dropped out of college. You feel me? I could try to keep using. The only two drugs I've never done in my life were PCP and meth. And I thought, well, maybe I should explore the avenues of those substances. Maybe it's time. But that wasn't available really in my scene, so it was all exhausted. And then the third option was I could call the treatment center and actually ask for help, because I tried to make it so that every time I went home from this school, which at this point I had dropped out of, and worse than that, my grandmother was paying for school, but as slimy as this sounds, what I would do is I would enroll in the classes, and then the day after the classes started, I would go to the admissions office, I would drop out of every single class, and I would say, listen, I want this to go in this bank account for these classes, I want this to go in this bank account for these classes, I want you to drop this money here, and I want you to drop this money at this point, and I would set it up so halfway through the semester, I'd get several $1,000s to coast on, and I got several $1,000s of my family's money that I stole from them thinking I'm going to school. So I came back to DC from school, them thinking I'm going to school, but I'm not going to school. I'm just in the Tenderloin, shooting dope, smoking crack, and destroying my life. But I fly back with these several $1,000s that haven't hit in my bank account yet. And then the outpatient rehab center, I'm using every day, whatever money I can scrounge. I pissed hot on 5 tests, and they take me in a room after me being in that treatment center 6 times, and they're like, listen, here's a 90-day script for 24 milligrams of Suboxone a day. We're not going to cut you off because we know that you will have a seizure or you will go through you will have heart palpitations and you will die if you completely stop this. We don't want you to die. Here's even a recommendation for a doctor that we told about you that will keep filling this. So the chemical dependency piece was stated, but they said, we cannot handle you. You're showing up not enough in groups. You're shooting dope, coming back with blood on your arm like half of the time. Like we don't want to see you die, but we can't have you doing this. You've been using with other patients. You need to go to inpatient treatment. And I was just like, I'm not doing that. And the money hit, and I went on a $5,000 binge. But when the money ran out, I called the treatment center with the needle in my arm, but I called him. And I didn't do it when my mom was there. My mom said she wanted me to do it. She said she was staging an intervention. She was finna kick me out. None of that moved me. None of that moved me. I had people I could middleman for. I had plugs up in Baltimore, D.C., and New York that could get me dope dirt cheap that suburban kids who used Fetty would pay me triple the price for. I thought I was Al Capone all over again, but I called the treatment center, and then the night before I left for treatment, I had a gram and change of Fetty dope left. It was the strongest I'd ever bought from my plug in Petworth in D.C., and I loaded the whole joint into my spoon to the point I couldn't even see the blood when it registered. And I had the anime, my favorite movie on Akira, this anime film about this dystopian world that, to be honest, wasn't even nearly as dark as me in my mom's room with tinfoil and rigs everywhere and half stabbed out cigarettes. I'm smoking in the bathroom and putting a fan on. And I just said, if I die, it was meant to be. And if I wake up, then I'm actually going to do this. I made that bargain. I made that devil's bargain. And I didn't even pass out. I didn't even nod out like at all. I don't know if that's because my tolerance was high. Some of that dope was weaker, but I woke up in the morning and I went to treatment, and I didn't do it for anybody else. I got there and I went through detox pretty cold turkey. They offered a 14-day Suboxone taper. I told them I was scared and didn't think I was even capable of getting off MAT, but they're like, if you have a seizure, we're sending you to a hospital, but people have seizures here. Like, that's not going to stop us from taking you off this medication. This is an abstinence-based treatment center. Like, you're coming here to get clean. We're going to get you clean. But on the third day, they had me down to 2 milligrams, and I was already throwing up, so I was like, screw it. And I just cut the cord, and the counselor was like, you have to do the protocol. I was like, bro, this is like giving a thimble of beer to a gallon of vodka a day alcoholic. Y'all don't know. Y'all don't know what you're doing. Like, if I'm off, I'm off. Give me the nausea meds and that's it. Y'all want me clean? Let's get me clean. And then 2 days after I did that, I made a very stupid and selfish mistake. That was the cherry on the sundae for all the selfish mistakes I had made before. They say you're not supposed to have a relationship or fall in love with someone to make any significant life changes other than getting sober or the relocation you have to do for the sober house or whatever it is in your first year of recovery. But the one girl that I thought was cute in there was this like cadre of sober bros, you know, the types like gym bros, like rehab shuffle type dudes, state insurance, all love to them. I love those dudes. I'm still in contact with a couple of the ones that survived. Like, they're good people. They got couplers, long-term recovery, got families. But one was like, yo, you see that girl down there, that hipster girl? That's good money, bro. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, she's been talking about. I thought he was trolling, but he wasn't. But the truth is that we were both incredibly hurt people that were looking for the same thing I've said from the beginning, an external solution to an internal problem. And I should have said, no, I'm going to stay in my lane, but I was so starved. I wasn't even like horny or like lovesick at all. I was just looking for any distraction to get me outside of myself. So I hook up with her sloppily. I catch feelings. Someone starts a rumor that says I have AIDS because he wants to hook up with her. And I think the damn world has ended. So I do what I do best. I call up my family. I manipulate them just like I did going from one college where I dropped out and then crashed my car to go to the other college. I do the same thing, same model with the treatment center. To my exhausted, beleaguered, at this point, 5 years sober in the room's mom, who's finally thinking her son's at treatment, doing it for himself. 14 days in, I say, Mom, I don't want to be here at the retreat. That was the center. I want to go to Karen Foundation. Can you Western Union me $500 and get me a train ticket to Philly or Doylestown, and then I can transfer to Karen, but I didn't want to do that. Every single kid in this center, whether they came from a mansion or a trailer park, got high in Kensington because it was a Pennsylvania-based treatment center, so all the kids were Kenzo or like Camden kids. And they told me, because every rehab center is like a street learning seminar, they said, you want to go to Allegheny, you want to go to the alphabet blocks in the Badlands. They throw out free bundle bags into the air. And I was like, bet it's Christmas. So I get my mom to transfer me the money. I'm sitting in the treatment center office, and at this point, I'm completely detoxed. I'm not throwing up anymore. I'm even sleeping right, but it's not about the chemicals. It's about the fact that I do not think I'm capable, the same way I didn't think I was capable as a young, scared kid with my hands over my ears, of living on the plane of where life actually is, dealing with sensory overload, dealing with emotional overload, dealing with rejection. And I'm in the treatment center office, and there's this counselor or treatment tech there, and I'll never forget the expression on her face. She's reading a magazine. I'm saying, I'm about to go to Karen Foundation. I'm about to get the train. And she's like, yeah, okay. She doesn't buy it at all for the reasons why I'm AMAing, and she's right. I'm about to go to Philly and spend every single cent my mom's Western Union me to go check out in Kensington, knowing that my tolerance is low enough that I'm not coming back once I shoot that bag. And I see this little reflective surface on the desk. My memory serves me that it's like a little picture mirror, but it might have just been like a metallic, shiny, like computer, like something. But I see my face clear as day. And I'm 34. I was 24 back then. I had bags under my eyes, worse than my tear troughs now. I had a Shaggy from Scooby-Doo, scraggly pube beard with like scabs all over my face. I didn't like what I saw. I didn't like the disgusting life of completely deceiving my family and destroying everything that their patient love had done. I didn't think I was worthy of saving. But then I looked closer, right? And I saw that same kid. I said, I'm not worth saving. But maybe that kid in the Toys R Us, that kid who cried on the couch with when his parents got divorced, or when kids made fun of him for wanting to save the bugs that they were killing and yelled at them with the autism spectrum voice on the playground, who, you know, watched his mom and ran out to the back basketball court, who cried when, you know, his friends thought he was weird, who wasn't let into the party, who tried all these things to get out of himself. Maybe that kid's worth saving. And there was a voice screaming at me, and I'm a believer in God and Jesus Christ. Everyone's entitled there. I believe in God and Christ now. I didn't then. But there was a voice within me, and it might have just been my subconscious something, but it was this whole warmth, different than what a bag of dope got me. And it was like, don't get in the cab. And I said, please cancel the cab and tell every single tech that if I ever ask to get out of this treatment center again, not to listen to me, I'm staying. And then what happened is the day after that, so even though June 13th, 2016 is my sober date, and I don't even know what that day was. I think it was June 24th, which coincidentally is my mom's sobriety date. I think it was like 11 days in. That would have been cool, but somewhere in between the 24th and 28th, that's my real emotional sobriety date, because that's the point I realized that even though the chemicals were out of the picture, nothing external could be my driving force in staying sober. And at that point, all these opportunities that I thought were corny before that psychic shift started to make sense to me. I used to think it was corny to volunteer to work in the cafeteria and clean up the floors in the different places and set up chairs in the meeting halls. But I volunteered for every single dinner, lunch, breakfast, waking up an hour early, setting the alarm clock with my roommate pissed at me, calling me like a goody two-shoes. I did not care, because what I realized is I had been doing it wrong the whole time. I had been searching for an external solution for an internal problem that was destroying me, where I could have been of service and gotten real sustainable validation for my heart, instead of the fact that I was a good piano player, a good rapper, had cool clothes, whatever it was. Because that attaboy that I got from the cafeteria workers after I said, you sure I don't have to clean that corner again? You sure I don't have to scrub this little piece of this food tray? You sure that all the chairs are stacked and all the little tissue papers off the ground are in the trash? It's like, nah, bro, go to bed. Like, you're past curfew. Like, that became my hit. And so when I got out and I went to a recovery house, and there was blood sprayed on the wall from a dude who had relapsed and left an FU in the form of a rig spray on the wall, and a kid that I knew in treatment fell out and got in a coma in Reading, Pennsylvania, day after he got out, and my friends kept dying, and jobs kept slamming the doors in my face that I applied to in early recovery. And my mom, I never get fellowship specific, but let's just say I'm not afraid to take the stairs when the elevator's broken. And my mom took me to a place where I met some sober guys, and they showed me the ropes, and they got me through living in a sober house and building back the trust of my family. They got me through getting rejected from jobs and applying for my first busboy job. And I'm gonna tell you something, man, like, the apron, the black tie, the clog shoes were corny as hell at this French corporate bistro that I worked at, man. But 2 weeks into that job, 3.5 weeks sober, walking out of that job, going back to live with my mom before I got my first apartment, out of the sober house, stains on my shirt. I felt so friggin' free, bro. I was like, because the baggage of copping the bag was not there. It might have been like a seemingly dead-end job. It wasn't glamorous, but like getting my hands dirty, literally cleaning people's plates, same way I did in the treatment center, and being a service. It was like a rush, dude. And every single thing I learned at work, the executive function skills that I never learned, and I said, oh, I'm autism spectrum, I'm never going to learn large motor stuff, I'm never going to learn that type of balance, never going to learn those interpersonal skills. I talked through it with other sober people who had those same things, and these people had nothing in common with me. Their paths were completely different. They were from the hollers of West Virginia. They were from the mountains of Colorado. They were from the hoods of DC, but not the people that I trapped with in my like fake Scarface days. But showed me, they're like, nah, you don't get to give yourself an excuse to go to work. It's not like you're a bad person if you relapse or if you don't do the work at your job. You deserve to do the work to build yourself up. and I got promoted at work when I got promoting myself in my own recovery through the hard work I did working with people one-on-one. I cried, did everything that I thought was corny before I got sober. I cried my eyes out talking about resentment, fear, doubt, guilt, and shame with a dude that I had nothing in common with in a tiny little room. Took my mom to the hospital at midnight when she cut herself in the kitchen, and I was tired as hell going into work the next day, and it felt good. I had hard conversations with my dad when I admitted that I was lying to him every single moment I was out in San Francisco, and we cried our eyes out, this stoic dude, and he gave me the keys to the same home that I talked about briefly earlier, where I would get my connection with him and get that real, not playing piano or contentious conversations, but real validation, hauling sleds up a logging road in the midst of snowy, icy 10 below Vermont, getting that real earth, that real feeling up in the trees where the air is clear and we could clear the air between us. And I sat in that same house, and he gave me the keys and he said, I'm proud of you. And I freaking lost it, bro. That's a high. Having a breaking down conversation with someone who doesn't understand addiction, building back respect with your family, whoever's still living, whether it's blood family or real family, going to work every day when you're tired and working through your resentments and fears and understanding that the whole world's not going to get sober emotionally or chemically just because you are, going to work in a treatment center and understanding that what worked for you isn't going to work for other people. And I was at a place in my life where I was finally happy. I had been doing music a little bit here and there, but I wasn't even posting it on SoundCloud. It was 2018, 2 years sober, working as a bartender, back in school at University of Maryland University College to be a drug counselor, get my preliminary psych degree. I had my life all mapped out, and none of it had to do with content, with music, with writing, with entertainment. I was good. And at that point, I believe it's God, you can call it just the universe, opened a door for me. I went up for my 27th birthday in 2018 to go to the house that my dad built with his bare hands that he had given to me. And I didn't have a phone there. At the time, there was no phone line. That was what I loved about it the most. But they saw my car pull up in the driveway for the first snows. And there was a dude who was a family friend's son of my dad's. And he comes up to me, and there's an old rusty piano that my dad had hauled up as a present, like a junkyard piano, not in tune. I could barely play anything on it, but I had been working on these raps that combined classical piano and hip hop together, because with a clean and sober mind, I could finally play piano and rap and figure out how to do that. But I wasn't putting it out anywhere. I was just working on it and workshopping it. Nobody had heard it, and I was super self-conscious about it. But dude was so he came up with some crackers and cheese. He's like, yo, it's been 15 years. What's up, man? So great to see you. I hear you're sober, blah, 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 blah. Hear you're making a little music just for fun. I'd love to hear it. And I'm like, nah, I don't want to play it for you, man. It's all about recovery. When he's like, bro, play it. And I play him a song, which is the 4th track, I believe, or somewhere in there on my debut album, Clean, the piano rap album called Liquid Fentanyl. And he says, you got to meet this dude who owns this studio. He said, and I'm picturing just this cheap little studio in the backwoods of Vermont or whatever. And I almost didn't do it because I was pulling down to this hardware shop in this little town called Arlington where they had cell service. And dude's a super busy guy, but I called the number a couple times, text him, and he's not responding. And I get this little pipe piece because the sump pump at my dad's house is broken. And I got my little Mr. Richard Fix-It thing on, even though I don't know jack about trays. I'm a little high Jewish city boy. I don't know nothing, but I'm trying to fix this sump pump. And I get the part from this little Vermont hardware store, and I'm driving to this fork in the road where if you make the left, it's no cell service. Even if he calls me, I wouldn't get the call. I literally have my turn signal on. I get a call. Come meet me at the hardware store. I go there, dude in this Cadillac. I'm like, this is a town where everybody got rusted lifted trucks. So I'm like a Cadillac, what? He takes me to this studio with glass pane windows and 9-foot concert grand piano. And to take it back to the whole my family's history thing, the walls are lined with caricatures and fine art pieces of people from Broadway and that era of American music. And one of them is of my great grandfather. And it turns out that dude is a doctor and a hospitalist who's also a Broadway producer. Okay, whatever. He's built this studio. The studio literally opened 3 days before this happened. Literally the day before I came up to Vermont to work on my dad's house for my birthday, taking time off work. And he had just been at a town meeting, literally less than a week earlier, where he had heard firsthand testimony from grandparents who lost their kids to fentanyl poisoning. And this was in 2018 when the Fetty was just starting to hit the rural areas in the Northeast. And the grandparents were saying, nobody knows what to do about this. Nobody has a solution, not the cops, not the treatment centers. We're raising our grandkids. Nobody has any access to recovery support services. How can we raise awareness about this and get people to do something? So he was fired up because he had bought all these buildings to develop this artist colony. And he said to me, after I played him the same songs I had played to my friend, he's like, that's very cool. What are you doing with your life? And I said, I'm working as a drug counselor. You know, I'm doing this music, but I want to stay sober. I want to keep it going. This isn't as meaningful to me as my work as a drug counselor and working towards that. And he said, do you think you can reach more people with your words and your music than you can one-on-one as a counselor? And I saw the water rushing out the window in this fancy building next to the studio that he built with all these photos of, like, you know, these figures in my family. And I said, all right, man, I'll think about it. He said, just do this. I'll pay you $500 to buy one of your songs, or at least part of the rights to it. Come back to the studio, let's do a session. And so I had to coordinate it with my job. I was going back and forth. We start working together. We start doing these songs. And then within 3 months, I've moved up to Vermont. I'm now a signed artist to a studio with a Grammy-winning engineer. And it didn't happen because I put my stuff on YouTube. It happened because I did the work in recovery to earn my dad's trust. And I shared openly with his friend. And from there, the same way that you can say every single cliche of active addiction, like when I decided to stop drug-a-logging, every single cliche of recovery advocacy and life in recovery. I met the love of my life. We got a dog. We moved into my dad's house. We moved out when she got pregnant. We got a little townhouse in Vermont. I started writing for tourist magazines. We had 2 kids and a third on the way. And all of that stuff to me is much more important and much more of a gift of recovery than I love my platform. But I haven't even talked about it yet because to me, the platform isn't consequential. To me, the life is
Amen.
what is important to me. But the same way I picked up the phone to call the treatment center back in 2016, I picked up the phone 5 months after my first-born son, Jude, was born. And I picked up my phone and I said a little thing that was 40 seconds long that would have helped me in active addiction. That's the rule I do for all my content. And through that, I've gotten to meet a lot of incredible, strong, resilient people over the digital space, yourself included. And I've been able to give away a little piece of what's been freely given to me. And, you know, I've worked with a lot of people that have inspired me. There's too many creators to name, but like Kalichi, Matt Keegan, Jimmy McGill, you know, Skylar Ray, Rachel Elizabeth, who's his lifestyle creator, but she was the first person in recovery who also creates to repost me. Like, she was a big reason that my platform is what it is. And she probably doesn't know that, but she is. Quinn Lapierre on the Cali Sober side. You know, the people on all paths of recovery, the abstinence, harm reduction, and MAT community on TikTok. I've learned so much from so many people, even when our paths don't align. And there's room for respectful disagreement, but I've learned so much more, the point is, than I have given to this space. But it's the same thing that what I learned at treatment is, and I'll close with this. The one mistake that I made, and I could never do this even if I ran my life over in a simulation 1,000 times because I didn't know then what I know now. The biggest mistake I ever made as a kid, 3 years old under that table, was not screaming under the table. It was screaming with my hands over my ears. Because when I opened up my ears to listen and stopped just screaming into the void and welcomed in what I had been trying to block out, God, love, connection, discomfort, tension, the whole pantheon of human experience. That's when the promises came, and that's when the real gifts of recovery and the real gifts of life started showing up. So if there's anybody out there in the struggle, you know, a kid with mental health issues about to take his first drink, a person who's 20 years in shooting meth or shooting Fetty, like, you know, on the blade or like in Skid Row, you don't have to push your hands over your ears anymore, man. Because there's people who want to listen to you, but there's also people who might say some things, whether in a treatment center, in a harm reduction group, in the rooms, anywhere, that can give you what the bag and the bottle, I promise you on God, never will. And I'll reiterate, you're not a bad person who deserves to get sober or find whatever path to recovery works for you as punishment. You're a good person who deserves to get sober because your life is valuable and you deserve a better life.
Amen. Let me ask you a couple questions.
Yeah, man.
So when you were talking, first of all, I definitely want to say that was an awesome testimony.
Thank you, man.
There's a couple spots that I know you mentioned, and when you were like, what people believe is what people believe. You know, I'm a believer as well, of Christ, you know, of God. I am a follower as well. And I believe when you had that moment, that was the Holy Spirit. That's how that works. He knows what we're going to do before we do it, man. That's just bottom line, whether people believe it or not. And he knew where you were going to go with your life, and he had a plan. You know, some of us have to hit rock bottom before we make those moves. that's the reality of it. One of the things when you were going through your stuff that I wrote down, you mentioned about going to counseling. I won't dig too deep into this, but you were going to counseling. But did you ever really work any of your real core issues?
I did, but they remain much deeper onion layers to dissect. I overcame the resentment I had for my parents getting divorced, not through therapy, but 2 months into having my first son.
There you go.
That did what therapy could not. When I realized what parenting entailed, I forgave anything my parents ever did. I might still have, like, the same way a computer, when you delete a file, there's still cache. There might be
Right.
like little triggering artifacts that, like, they come up and like I respond accordingly, but like intellectually and a lot spiritually, I let go of that. When my mom's abusive boyfriend, God rest his soul, died, I forgave him.
There you go.
When I understood that the same discomfort, fear, anguish, and pain that pushed me towards the bag, a lot of which stemmed from spiritual stuff, emotional stuff, nature nurture stuff, sure, but a part of that nature is autism spectrum disorder. You know, there's some people who are people of faith who say, oh, you know, mental health, like,
No.
I think that whether you want to see it through a lens of demons or neurodivergent, whatever, the terminology it doesn't matter to me. Whether you want to give it a diagnosis or not, like, what I experienced in terms of sensory overload is real. And I have told it
Absolutely.
to people who are both on the same, like, diagnosis or the same continuum as me, and people who haven't, and the people who are not on that diagnosis, which I've gotten 3 times from the specialist when I was 3, 9 years old, and then I went back into therapy for a year before I moved to Vermont when I was 26. It's like they all said, yes, like, this is you, this clocks. What really helped me with that is it's still there, but I stopped hating myself for it. It's like, this is who I am, and it's not a curse if I don't want it to be. It's always
Right.
going to be a little tough looking people in the eye, but I can look them in the eye anyway with full understanding that if I don't know how to read facial expressions or it takes more effort, that, like, I am deserving of coming up with effective solutions to navigate that. It's not like, it's the same thing with addiction. It's like when I realized the cravings weren't going to go away, I was like, well, these can be fuel for me to chase
Yeah.
recovery. Like, I think it's a fallacy that people say that if you have a mental health breakdown or if you have a craving, that, like, that is an inevitable cascade. I'm not saying like you're a bad person if it happens, but for me, it's like this can be the fuel that I can alchemize and sublimate into fuel for chasing recovery and self-betterment. So to answer your question
And
simply, you know, I have, but there's a lot more work to be done.
I
A lot more
appreciate
work.
your honesty because and with all due respect, Benjamin, I really think there's still a lot of hurt in your heart.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
just
a
my
lot.
opinion. You do recovery so beautifully, man. A lot of the words that you use are astronomically just so big and so awesome. I am very intrigued with your words, and I could totally tell how that could be a total manipulation during your during you're very educated, man, and I like that. But when it comes down to recovery, it's a real serious thing. We have to work those core issues, man. Whether we're talking about them on situations like this or you reaching out to me and we just talking as friends, you have
For
to talk
sure.
about that stuff. Sometimes not always meeting settings is the way to go. People could get mad at me for saying that too, but I don't really care. Sometimes just talking as a friend and having an ear to listen helps, man. It really does. And in order to, because where you're at in your recovery now is you're able to reach out to people and they're going to listen. They want to know how did Benjamin how does Benjamin get clean and sober and remain it? How does he go through it? And one of the most important things is when they hear your testimony, they gotta realize too, and this is for anybody that's listening, they gotta realize too that you have to work these things because what happens is when we do what they call triggers, these are what gets triggered. You know, for me, losing my whole family was a big trigger for me. I never dealt with it. I don't remember my brother's funeral to this day. I was old enough to remember. It was like 12 or 13. I don't remember. I couldn't. If you paid me $1 million, I couldn't tell you what happened. Um, that's trauma. You know what I'm saying? In your story, I heard there was a lot of heartbreak, man. There's a lot of trauma in there. So I just that's my advice to you, bro. I will really, whether it's me or someone close or, you know what I mean? I really want you to do that. I want you to work on that too. You're doing great. I support everything you're doing. And I hope this is just the beginning of a good friendship, man, because you have a lot of good stuff.
Thank you, man. Yeah, the work is always there. It remains, and I'm grateful you said that because people calling each other out with love about the work that remains is the essence of recovery. I don't want to get complacent. I don't want to
No.
think that there's an end to better and there's an end to turning over stones and sublimating darkness into light.
Yeah, they say recovery is like renting a house and rent's due.
I
You
love
know what I
that.
mean?
That's
You
awesome.
know, it's always due, right? So
Yeah.
we have
Sure.
to respect it. You know, I share this on my other podcasts and stuff. We have to respect it. The minute we lose respect of it, and we talked about this before we came on here, we have to respect it. The minute we lose respect for it, we lose foundation, we lose ground. Before I close this though, I want to ask you one more question.
Yeah, for sure.
If you, and we'll make it brief because I don't want to go over too much of it.
You're good.
If you could, so that moment where things got really bad, you know, and I heard some stuff on your Facebook, there was a couple incidents where you talk about places you were and stuff like that. Let's go to 17, 18, somewhere around there. If you can tell yourself something and think that you can tell yourself something to get into your own head that might change how you're thinking, and not something that would be scripted like you would think. I don't even know how to say it. You know what I mean? Like I don't want some textbook. There we go. I wouldn't want something textbook. I want something that meaningful, that if you were standing, if I was you 17 years ago, what could you tell me that you would hope? Because there is a point, obviously, that there's probably nothing nobody could have told me nothing at 17. I was on my way to prisons.
It's the same thing that I tell people who hit me up asking for features or paid collabs of any kind, when I can tell with all love to them that it's purely to access whatever motion that they believe that I have, which, you know, there's people get billions of streams, like my stuff ain't nothing, but it's open to interpretation. But what I mean, the connection here is, at the point that I was 17 years old, I mentioned that there was me selling weed or whatever, and like, it was my passport into the party. It was my entry into like the rap game and like all these things. And not everybody raps. Not everybody like traps even on that like low mid range, like pounds couple of week like level. I was never Scarface, but like in my high school, I was whatever. So what I would say is, whether it's a substance, whether it's a piece of status, whether it's a goal that is completely centered on an instant gratification outcome, where somebody's identity is either deconstructed because we don't want to look at ourselves, or it's augmented or pushed up by something that's not in here. What I should have done from the beginning is put myself on. That's like a hip hop term, but it's like rappers say that I put myself on. I did it independent. And I used to think, oh, that's so cool. They did it financially. They did it movement wise. But the deeper thing that I was missing is, they found the self-starting energy, regardless of anything else that was going on around them, to not fall prey to traps, separate from any moral stuff. It's not like, oh, don't get high because it's the wrong thing to do. Pull your pants up, get a job. It's like, nah, don't let them play you. Don't let them like take your sauce. Because every time that I put every cent, and more than that, every hour and every piece of my energy into something that was literally burning me up and destroying me from within on every level, and every time I thought that like total strangers and like the external world was dictating like who I was, every single piece of power and like actual clout, not of a superficial thing, but like actual power. And I'm gonna speak to the men here, because I know for women it's different, but like, I based my masculine identity off of how much money was in my pocket, off of how many hits I had. Back then it was Dat Piff and YouTube, now it's Spotify, like TikTok, whatever, and like who I was trapping with, who I was moving with, what like clothes were on my body. And yeah, that's great. I'm not gonna say it doesn't have flash and it doesn't give you a hit separate from the substance. That's real. I'm not gonna take away from that. What I'm saying is that all those things are absolutely meaningless if where it's going to take you is being dope sick and strung out on the streets of the Tenderloin 6 years later. And not everybody goes there. I'm not going to say, have one drink and you'll end up like me. But for the percentage of us who are addicts and do use substances with chemical dependency as part of that matrix of external gratification, there's a chance that if you get started going in that whole thing, it's going to get real in a way that is not going to be glamorous, not going to be cinematic, not going to be lit, Not gonna be TikTok worthy, not gonna be record deal, not gonna be sports deal, not gonna be $1 billion in Bitcoin on a jet in Dubai. It's gonna be you, the foil, the rig, the bottle, or just lonely and depressed in your room in a way that medication can't touch. And you might ask yourself, what if I stopped chasing something external and did the real work that I should have done within to begin with, so that I can actually live a life without trying to make everybody else happy and find a place where I belong in that fleeting nonsense, and actually build something real for myself? Because that is what I was actually seeking the whole time. And it might not make sense to you at 17, but when a bag of weed or a bottle runs out, and you ain't got no money in your pocket, I want you to imagine that feeling times 1,000 with a bag of dope or a real liquor bottle or a crack pipe. And that's where it can take you. And if I had known that with full knowledge of where it took me, I would have made the same decision I made in that treatment center when I was at those parties when I was 17. And it's hard to know. You can hear this one ear out the other, but I acknowledge the temptation there. I acknowledge the pull. But that same pull might just pull you to a place you don't want to go, and you do not have to go through that. You're better than that.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, man. Well, I appreciate you. Don't go nowhere. I want to talk to you.
Let's do it, man. Thank you for having me on.